The Unmarked by Matt Fleagle. Chapter 25. Salvation from the Fallen Tree. It took some time for the commotion among the villagers to die down. Confused Dellbloods went on looking at each other's faces to confirm what the child had first noticed. Finally, Kaleb cleared his throat. He took a few steps toward the village elders. Teva made a quick move to impede his progress, fearful that one of the Dellbloods might try to harm him. With a grateful smile and a reassuring pat on her furry back, Kaleb made his way around the wolf and approached Fearless. For several moments the shrunken old man with the cane stood staring the young man in the face without saying a word. Kaleb reached out his sweaty hand and placed his palm against Fearless's wrinkled forehead. To the crowd's surprise, the old man did not flinch or budge. "What do you think you're doing?" demanded one of the other elders, taking a step toward Kaleb, but stepping back when Grimwit growled in his direction. "What I'm saying is," the man went on less forcefully, "none of us is allowed to touch the head elder without his permission." Kaleb did not answer him. He leaned toward Fearless, and taking the old man's hand in his own, Kaleb pressed Fearless's open palm against his own forehead. "Do you now see, head elder?" Kaleb said. "You and I, we are no different. The mark on your head had no power over you, no power to save your people. It brought superstition and fear. Tonight it nearly sealed you into a pact forged with unspeakable cruelty." Fearless glanced at the crowd of unmarked Dellbloods behind him, then turned back to Kaleb. He did not answer the young man, who lowered his hand and Fearless's from their respective brows. "You and your village rejected me as an unmarked before I could speak a word in my defense," Kaleb went on. "Yet without a mark I survived swords and beasts, even a dragon. Without a mark I was invited to an animal council, heard the forest spirit's music, watched the history of the world danced before my very eyes." Fearless stared at him in silence, as did all the beasts and humans present. "What I'm saying is, real power is not bound up in a tree, or some rock in the mountains to the north. Fearless, if you only knew the real meaning of your myths, you would know that a mere tree cannot bestow blessings or curses. For as we unmarked ones have learned," here Kaleb glanced at Amber, who smiled back at him as the baby slept in her arms, "the only real blessing afforded to us is in love. That is the token by which the forest spirit gives power and shares himself with us. And that is why the only real curse that threatens us comes alive the moment hatred awakes in a human heart." Fearless cleared his throat. For some time he stared at the dew-covered ground. "But young man, even if what you are saying is true," he said weakly, "that marks and sacred trees are all just old superstitions, even if that's true, that knowledge does us no good. Even if this tree has no power to save us, it is the one thing the Stonerenders feared. At this very moment they are preparing, under Valistan's command, to siege Glenwood Village and make us all their slaves." Kaleb glanced back at the sacred tree, laying like an abandoned, shadowy, fallen tower in the center of the clearing. A curious look crossed Kaleb's face. He turned back to Fearless and smiled. "But Fearless, I never said the sacred tree had no power, only that you misunderstood the purpose of this tree." At this, Kaleb crossed the clearing and stood at the base of the fallen tree. "What are you doing, boy?" Fearless said. Retrieving his axe from the ground, Kaleb stepped up to a small branch jutting out from the fallen trunk of the tree. He raised the axe above his head and brought it down upon the base of the branch, severing it from the trunk. The crowd shuddered again at the sound of snapping sinews running through the ancient timber, but looked on with interest nonetheless, wondering what Kaleb was up to. The log splitter picked up the branch he had just lopped off and ran up to a small, cowering woman in the front line of the crowd. Hold this out, in front of you, Kaleb said, pushing the narrow 3-foot branch into her small hands. Hold it like a sword. That's right. Kaleb stepped back a few paces. Stand right there, and the rest of you fall back, he said. The woman, confused but obedient, held the branch out in front of her like a frail, misshapen sword. Perfect, Kaleb said. He took one more step back. Then, with a violent yell, he suddenly rushed toward the woman, his axe raised above his head. Glista jumped forward to stop him, but it was too late. Before she could intervene, Kaleb had brought his axe down upon the thin stick in the woman's hand with tremendous, lethal force. The woman screamed, as did the crowd, but opened her eyes a moment later to find that Kaleb's axe had not penetrated the wood. In fact, the force of his blow had not even knocked her to the ground. She stood in the exact same position, feet not an inch removed from where she had planted them before Kaleb's axe fell. With squinting eyes, the woman leaned in to look at the bark along the edge of the branch. The bark was not even scratched. Kaleb laughed. And that, he said, flashing a knowing wink at Glista and a roving glance across the puzzled faces in the crowd. That is how this tree might yet save us Dellbloods from our enemies. Grimwit snorted abruptly, then bellowed in an open-throated roar that unnerved many Dellbloods present. Well, what are you humans waiting for? You heard the log splitter. There's a battle to fight. Let's get to work.